Hello, YouTube. Today I want to tell you more about one of my favorite subjects, about the abominable snowman, or Almasta, or the mysterious origin of Yeti, ulmesh, koldan. This and dozens of other names common among the peoples of the north, the Ural Mountains, Siberia, and the Far East refer to a creature that cryptozoologists call a relic hominid. For most indigenous peoples of the protected areas of Russia, the abominable snowman is associated with the powerful spirit of the taiga, forest or the mountains, and is present in many national legends and folklore. According to one Evenk legend, the king of this northern people, Urals, who lived in the 16th century, was born from the union of an ordinary man and a koldan ugra, a shaggy woman. According to this legend, from his unusual mother, the Evenki king supposedly inherited amazing abilities to read the thoughts of the interlocutor, move silently, and impose his will by the power of a single glance. Another legend says that the first ruler of the Yakut people, Tsulge Darkhan, was brought to the shepherds as a baby in a birch basket by the furry monster ulmesh, from whose terrible appearance they fell to the ground. Later, Tsulge Darkhan became rich and powerful ruler, whose possessions were located on the left bank of the Lena River, from the present-day town of Yakutsk to Pokrovsk. This ruler was the founder of the dynasty of Yakut kings, distinguished by their heroic build and incredible strength. The Russian pioneers or conquerors who appeared in the 18th century in Altai were amazed by the stories of the local population about the mysterious people who came from the Gobi Desert in immemorial times and settled in the caves of the Kurai Ridge. Please see my videos about Mongolia and the Gobi Desert. Discover knowledge of underground cities and strange humanoids, and more. According to the evidence of the Altaians, representatives of these people were distinguished by gigantic growth, and their entire body was covered with thick fur. Archival memories of certain Kazakh, Stepan Sukharukov, have been preserved, and he allegedly, in the winter of 1793, near the village of Chaganuzun in the southeast of the Altai, he saw several footprints in the snow that vaguely resembled human ones, but an arshin long. Arshin is an obsolete Russian land unit equal to 71.12 centimeters. One of the local shamans even showed the guest a large, dense, foul-smelling tuft of wool, which allegedly belonged to one of the mountain spirits, which the Altaians consider representatives of this mysterious people. It is the servant of shamanic cults who have maintained a special attitude to the abominable snowman for centuries. Fragments of wool, droppings, and even objects touched by a relic hominid were considered very valuable relics by shamans. In particular, Yeti wool or droppings were part of special medicines that shamans used to treat sick tribesmen. Pieces of earth or stones on which the foot of the abominable snowman stepped were often used to make amulets, and it was customary to wash with water from the reservoir from which he or she drank in the morning. It was believed that in this way women could preserve their youth and beauty for a long time. In the southeast of the Sayan Spur, at an altitude of 1,500 meters, there is a small lake, Kobikar, filled with the waters of melting glaciers. There is a belief among the local population that the master of the mountains, that's what they call the abominable snowman here, comes to this lake to drink on dark, moonless nights. Therefore, among the Tuans living in the villages nearby to the highland lake, it is still customary to perform regular cleansings in this reservoir. It is believed that bathing in Kobikar prolongs life. This fact, of course, can be treated as a prejudice, but the impartial medical statistics indicate that the life expectancy of the population of that area is 10 years higher than the average for the region. So one day, when peace comes to the land, you will know where to travel in the Russian Asia. The incident at the Chikataman Pass is something I'm going to tell you about. The facts of the encounter of a man and a relic hominid began to be documented and reached the general public only in the 20th century. So in Russia, one of the first mentions of an abominable snowman dates back to 1908. It was then in the newspaper Taborsk Vedomosti. They wrote about how the Tomsk merchant Yegor Kuzmich Savinov, who was carrying several carts with goods from Manchuria along the famous Chui Tract in the area of the Chikataman Pass, got caught in a snowstorm. One of the horses stumbled, the sled skidded, and they began to slide into the abyss. The merchant's man and Savinov himself ran up and tried to save the heavy baggage and horses, but their strength was not enough. Suddenly the horses began to snore and kick, showing great anxiety. The merchant for a moment thought that they had smelled a bear and took out a gun, and then through the snow the outlines of a huge dark figure appeared, much larger than an ordinary bear. Following this, the horses quieted down, and the people themselves were attacked by an inexplicable stupor. The creature, moving on two legs, approached the sledge hanging over the abyss, pulled them out of the snowy side of the road with one powerful jerk, and in a moment it seemed to disappear into a dense blizzard. Well, then we time travel 30 years forward and find the following episode. The story of the projectionist A.G. Sarapulov. In 1938, he served in the Far East on the border with Manchuria. Once, was summer, we were doing a training trip. At the head was a political officer. We walked through the forest, which was interspersed with open areas. On one of the sides, we noticed an incomprehensible creature ahead, about 400 meters away. The political officer had binoculars, and through it was clear that it looked like an ape, moving on two legs. It moved on two legs, often stooped, looking for something on the ground. From time to time, it picked up something there. It was covered from head to toe with hair and had no clothes. We tried to approach it, but to no avail. It noticed us and disappeared into the forest. A few kilometers later, it appeared ahead of us again. We decided to covertly approach him and take a closer look, and if possible, then surround him. But he or it noticed our maneuver and disappeared completely. The height of this creature was no less than 2 meters. Several decades later, and another encounter. Vladislav Pichugin said that he maintained friendly contact with a wild hairy man for 2 years. Here is his story, recorded by the correspondent of the Russian newspaper Nedelya. In the early 1970s, I served as a paramedic at a Far Eastern outpost. Someone brought 2 bottles for me from the detachment medical unit, one with alcohol and one with ether. The next day, I look and one of the bottles is missing. The guys did not understand medical Latin and drank off the wrong one. It was trouble. I ran around the outpost asking. They answer me that it's too late. 2 have already been poisoned. It's good that they immediately spit out what they had time to drink. Well, I take them to my first aid post. They drank milk and I ask, why did you take the canned food for snacks or something? They swear they didn't take it. A few days later, I go down straight from the hill on which the outpost stood, and in one secluded place in a clearing, the missing cans lie about. They lie in a heap, all crumbled and opened by someone's huge teeth. I look at these cans and suddenly something made me raise my eyes. I look into the hazel bushes and I was stunned. It is as if there is no neck shoulders together with the head. That's what I see. The jaw is not protruding like that of a monkey, but flat, lipless. The forehead is sloping low, and all of it is covered with reddish black fur. Even the face, that is the muzzle, is completely overgrown. Hair from the head, like braids, hangs on the sides of the shoulders. But the eyes are good, yellowish, green in color, and stupid. Stupid to know to a disgrace. Despite the fact that the fangs were visible, the mug is impossibly funny. What particularly struck me was that his coat was very long from waist to toe, probably 20 centimeters, no less. It looked like he is wearing pants. His nails are closed. I saw that later, just some kind of triangles. More like nails, of course. The sex organs were not visible, but his muscles, when he moved, literally trembled. Yes, and the chest was still, like a man's chest. Yet the nose too, a triangle, flattened, and the shape of the head is pear-shaped. Where the forehead is, it is narrow. Where the jaws are, it's wide. His jaws, in fact, were not still. Every time I saw him, he was constantly chewing on something. He was about 2 meters tall, but very wide. Even though I didn't urinate in my pants, I was really scared. What to say? Military toughness still had an effect, so I didn't show that my knees was shaking. I asked him, "Well, little fool, did you escape from the zoo or something?" And I think to myself, who the hell knows? Maybe there is such a monkey breed like this? I wasn't interested in Bigfoot then. Yes, even if you read something on this topic, you will not suddenly guess who is in front of you. Well, a spitting image of an ape, in general. To cope with the excitement, I ask him something, and he answers. He bares his teeth, hisses something, sighs, and gasps. In short, he makes some inarticulate sounds. "What, my friend, do you want to eat?" I went to the dining room, picked up a bucket of food waste, brought it over. "Here," I say, "chew on what we have, and there are no bananas." He, this pest, realized, got out of the hazel and half-bent legs, looked into the bucket with one eye, the other is looking at me. He ate and groaned, almost moaning with pleasure. And I calmed down, sat down on a hillock. I sit, smoke, and look around, so that someone accidentally did not come up, right? They will see it and they will shoot at it. Our outpost was the most distant. It was called the Exile. The group was the most diverse. Soldiers, meaning. I fed the pheasants. I liked watching them. I used to go to the medical unit, so my pheasants were shot straight from the machine guns by the others. Bears were killed by them easily, so this creature would have been easily killed. We didn't always meet in the same place. Apparently, he was watching me from afar. Always approached from the leeward side. He usually moved on all fours. He stood on his hind legs only when he looked around. If he sensed something or something reached his ears, he never hid in the thicket, but always ran to the hill. A few seconds and he is already at the top. He sat on half bent and turns his head, and the hills were 100 to 150 meters high, steepness at 60 degrees. Despite the fact that there were 2 kilograms on him, he always appeared silently, as if growing out of the ground. Even on dry land, he moved absolutely silently. Even the snow did not crunch under him. I was always amazed. With such a mass, how is that possible? Perhaps due to the fact that his body weight was distributed over 4 limbs. This noiselessness was also surprising because sometimes he moved not with steps but with jumps, huge jumps, and not a single branch under it crunched. This always scared me. But he was also afraid of me, would not let me closer than 10 meters. When once I tried to get closer, I saw that his eyes had become somehow different, unpleasant, dangerous. I always put a bucket of food and went further than 10 meters away. But in general, in order to get a better look, closer is not necessary. What else has always amazed me? He was always all kind of smooth, well-groomed. The fur was so shiny. He was dirty only when the mosquitoes were rampant. He rolled in the mud on that purpose, but on the back the mosquitoes still got him. and then he began to scratch with his back against the tree. The pine tree of 30 centimeters in diameter shook intensely. Well, I came across him in the summer of 1969, and we parted ways in the winter of 1971. I think he was a grown man, but young. His eyes were young, or maybe they seemed young, because he had a stupid look and funny facial expressions when he began to squint his eyes, now to the right, then to the left. That he was stupid is unequivocal. A simple example: he usually ate from a bucket with his hands. The flies will sit on his 5 fingers. He will make a fist to get rid of them, and then he will put the flies into the porridge. He thinks he got rid of them. They got into his mouth, and then he spat them out. I roared with laughter. But he was smart enough to take a stick to get a branch of wild garlic from the swamp. He would not get his feet wet in vain. I have already said that he was afraid of people, in panic. Well, isn't that stupid? He will jump behind the hill and be sure to yell something from there or throw a stone. Well, from the Chinese side of the border, dogs got into the habit of running to us, and my friend had his own views on our dump, so to say. He lay in wait for the dogs on the outskirts of the outpost below under the hill. He hunted relentlessly. He sat on his haunches, spreading his long arms. He sat still, but without tension. He only moved his eyes back and forth, followed the dog's every movement. As soon as one approached, he grabbed it and with a lightning movement broke the dog's cervical vertebra. The head was separated from the body and kept only on the skin. Although he was a dunce, I always said something to him. I couldn't communicate with him like with a dumb person. Even he, tongueless, made a variety of sounds. He imitated even birds, and it gave subsequently its result. He started to say some short words. More precisely, he tried to pronounce. His voice was chesty, guttural. He especially wanted to say something when I got up and said goodbye. He demanded that the communications continue. Once he moved into the taiga and looked at me the way a dog looks, which is watching whether the owner is following him or not. I realized that he wanted to show me something. Followed him. We came to a huge fallen tree. Previously, in its rotten trunk, a bear equipped a lair for itself. My friend began to pull spruce branches, dry grass out of the hole, and kept trying to get inside. And so he popped his head, and that, trying to get in. That is so with a bear. Once the head has crawled through, then the whole body crawls through. But this creature had broad shoulders, so it was not working out. Why did he do it? Or maybe he offered the lair to me, like saying, move here, look how warm it is here. He tried his best to please me. He noticed that I love nuts and began to bring whole armfuls right with the fruits. It was also his favorite treat, only he ate differently than I did. He sat down and lay down under a hazel bush, grabbed branches, bent to his muzzle, and ate nuts right from the branch, right with the shell. His jaws worked like a harvester machine. There was only crackling sound. The fact that he was not such a fool can be judged by this example. There is so-called inconspicuous obstacle on the border. It had all kinds of animals fall into it, but he never got caught, not even once. With that mindset, I think he was stocking up for the winter. With the same nuts, wild garlic, and mountain ash, he could fill a full den, if he had one. I myself was interested in how he would exist through the winter, and I brought him porridge with pieces of meat. Get your calories, you fool, I tell him, and he spat out this meat like those flies. But he was not a pure vegetarian. He liked fried fish very much, but he ate it whole, along with the bones. He was a terrible tightwad, cheapskate. Once a chipmunk tried to steal nuts from him. He growled at it so much, everything inside me went cold. He was a terrible user. Surely somewhere nearby a bear survived from a den and settled in it, but he was also a terrible coward. When he is very frightened of something, he makes such a terrible cry that he frightens the one who frightened him. I once saw through the binoculars how a tiger was sneaking up on him, and how this tiger ran away after that cry, like a kitten, tail between legs. Well, we parted simply. I was released from the military service and left the Far East. Here are some reports from Northeast Asia. This vast territory includes Yakutia, Chukotka, Kamchatka, and the Magadan region. Mountain relief, tundra, and taiga prevail here. The extreme eastern tip of Asia is Cape Dezhnev in Chukotka, from which the mountains of Alaska are clearly visible in clear weather. It's like only 80 kilometers from the Bering Strait separate the two largest continents of the globe, Asia and America. Climatic conditions here and there are the same and extremely harsh. Suffice it to say that the pole of cold of the northern hemisphere is located here on the Asian side. On the American side, the climate is milder, but also quite severe, which is well described in Jack London's wonderful stories about the gold prospectors of Alaska. And surprisingly, both there and here we have more numerous reports of encounters with the relic hominid. Well, Chukotka. The Chukchi call the wild hairy people Tareke and consider them cannibals. The well-known Soviet writer Yuri Ritkhyu, a Russian author of Chukchi ethnicity, in a conversation with Burtseva told her that these creatures are well known in Chukotka, but the locals are reluctant to talk about them for superstitious reasons. It is believed that this will bring bad luck. Drawings on a walrus tusk you will find in the illustration to this video show very interesting scenes. Everything is clear. The cannibal Tereke was going to attack the hunter, and it's good that he was armed, that hunter, and was able to shoot the attacker. The lower drawing on the bone knife depicts a huge Tereke male caught and tied not only by hands and legs but also behind the head. At the same time, we know that the poor giant was not helped by his paranormal abilities, hypnotic and telepathic, with which he is allegedly able to read the minds of people and escape. He got into trouble. Let's look at some eyewitness accounts. Sankov, a resident of the village of Kenda, Khabarovsk region, spoke about his encounter with a hairy humanoid creature in the area of Lake Sabalyok. It happened on August 31st, 1965. So Sankov and two other boys went fishing and returning home got lost. They stopped at the crossroads to wait for one of the adults. Suddenly a man appeared in the distance, whom they first mistook for a Chukchi. When this man approached, the children were surprised that he wears skins in the summer, but the man suddenly got up on all fours and began to catch something in the grass. The boys hid and began to watch him. Now they clearly saw that he was not wearing a deer skin but his own brown hair. After a while, the so-called Chukcha straightened up and went about on two legs. 2 years later, at approximately the same place, Sankov and his father found traces of barefoot human feet. Chukchi never go barefoot, by the way, and you can find out about Chukchi in my videos. Wild men in those places are also called Kele and Pikilyan. And here is what the famous Moscow film actor Chebotaryov, who grew up in Chukotka in the village of Kvetinot, said. In 1970, he and two friends were returning from hunting expedition. Walking along the power line, they noticed under one of the supports, as it seemed to them, a barrel from under for the fuel. There are a lot of such barrels along the entire coast of Chukotka and along highways. Well, the hunt was unsuccessful, and the guys decided to shoot this barrel for fun. Before the first of them had time to pull the trigger, the barrel stirred and, straightening up, turned into a huge hairy man. Its height, according to Chebotaryov, reached 2/3 of the pillar. With a standard pillar, the height is 6 meters. It turned out that the height of this creature was at least 3 meters. The wild man moved with large steps towards the river and disappeared in the coastal bushes. Engineer Sharov, in his letter to researchers of the cryptids, spoke about an encounter with a wild man in 1989 in the Yurtinsky district of Chukotka on the Amguema River, where he worked on an expeditions. All members of the expedition left for food. Only he and his wife remained at the base. Several days they lived together, making the necessary observations and recording instrument readings. On October the 20th, having made observations on the slope of the hill, 1.5 kilometers from the base, he was returning home. It was snowing and raining. Visibility was poor. Going down the slope, he saw in front of him some kind of dark, moving mass. Deciding that it might be a bear, he stopped. At this time, the mass slowly straightened up, and in front of him, in all its huge growth, stood an ape-like creature with powerful muscular arms that hung almost to his knees. The encounter lasted only a few seconds, because seeing a man, the strange creature, without hurrying, turned its back on him and disappeared into the rain. Nevertheless, Sharov managed to see something. The powerful body of this creature was covered with rather light gray hair. The height, how tall it was not less than 220-230 centimeters, but perhaps higher, since Sharov was above him on the slope and watched him from above. In addition, it stopped a lot. Sharov especially remembered the face. It was almost completely hairy, like the whole body, deep-set eyes. Hair was not only under the eyes. In general, the face was reminiscent of simian creature. Later, a local historian from the village of Gvetinot told Sharov that hunters saw a similar creature in the winter and also on Amguem, but in the upper reaches. Again, those cases also occurred in 1989. Now let's move to a wonderful land of Yakutia, about which I told you so much. This northern republic is spread over vast expanses of Northeast Asia. The territory of Yakutia is located mainly within the forest taiga zone. The northern regions are subpolar tundra. The pole of cold of the northern hemisphere is located here. Winter temperatures often reach minus 60 degrees. The population is small and very sparse. There are very few roads. Settlements are located along the banks of rivers. There are practically no roads. The fact that large, hairy humanoid creatures live in these inhospitable places has been reported from ancient times with the knowledge of the indigenous population, but they were not given importance. They were referred to the areas of folklore. The first scientific report on the wild people of Yakutia, Chuchuna, and Mulen was made in 1925 by Professor of Mineralogy Dravert. The scientific world was not interested in the report of Professor Dravert, and for many years no one remembered about the northern hominids. However, some information about the encounter with mysterious Chuchuna appeared from time to time in local newspapers, and sometimes got into the editorial offices of Central Russian newspapers and magazines until recently. Well, Lake Toko is a typical landscape of central and eastern Yakutia. Let's get acquainted with some of the reports then. Alexandra from Zaporozhye region worked in in '54 as a chief livestock specialist on the Aladievsky reindeer breeding state farm in the lower reaches of the Indigirka River. The herds of the state farm grazed on the coast of the East Siberian Sea between Indigirka and Alazeya. Going around the camps of reindeer herders, he closely communicated with the Yukagirs, Chukchi, and the Yakuts. In conversations with them, the topic of Bigfoot was often touched upon. Shepherds and hunters told Alexandrov about their encounters with the Chuchuna, most of which, however, took place in the 1930s. According to their stories, the Chuchuna is over 2 meters tall, his body is covered with hair, and his eyes are red. They prey on wild and domestic deer, sometimes attack chums of people and kidnap women. Alexandrov's interlocutors were convinced that the Chuchuna was not a native inhabitant of these places, but came from the direction of the Kolyma Mountains. Well, Kalatko from Voroshilovgrad region worked for many years in Yakutia in the Verkhnya-Kolymsky region. In the 1980s, he himself saw traces of chuchuna in area between the Yasiga River and the Argyatis Mountains, on the shallows of the Talikol and Uturkol lakes. Once upon a time, in about the same places, he himself caught a glimpse of the chuchuna, who hid in the bushes. He was of great stature, all overgrown with hair. He was told, Kalatko was told that chuchuna swims and dives very well. Especially a lot of messages came from the Momsky district. Hunters and reindeer herders met chuchuna here even in recent years. It is most often seen in the spring, in May, and autumn, in September. Chuchuna is characterized by a loud whistle with which he, as if it were, warns of his appearance, but in general these creatures are very secretive and seek to avoid meetings with humans. Another incomprehensible feature of the chuchuna is that among the many reports of eyewitnesses, there is not one that would mention females or cubs. Here's the story of the state farm worker from Momsky, Starkov. It was the middle of September. There was no snow yet. Skudov and I came to the Kubo Lak Plat to cut hay. The tent was set up on the banks of the Indigirka. The surroundings were quiet and calm. It was 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I also rested with binoculars on the Tastayach River, where wild ducks swam. The partner left to look for other places for haymaking. I was alone. Suddenly, some strange sounds were heard from the side of the ducks, like the whistle of and a large shadow appeared in front of me. I woke up and saw the figure of a hairy man 3 to 4 meters away from me. Seeing that I was awake, the hairy man started to run. It was some kind of gray smoky color. I thought that I was imagining everything, and I got sick, and I went to the boat to leave for the village, forgetting about my friend. Approaching the river, I saw his footprints on the sand, real in reality. Then I realized that I was out of my mind, and I really saw two teka, as we called wild hairy people. Then I remembered that when he was approaching, he walked calmly with a normal gait. He had big clumsy feet. This means that he is big, massive, very strong. When he saw me, he ran away. His steps increased with each step, reaching up to 3 to 4 meters. Footprints in the sand were clearly visible. His heel apparently is hairy, about 60 centimeters long. Well, the media usually reported that in these places they met a hairy man 3 meters tall who leaves traces up to 55 centimeters long. It turns out that the one I saw is not one. There are several of them, perhaps a whole family. There are people in Moma who have seen a chuchuna. For example, Starkov and Potapov rode a boat and saw a humanoid creature standing alone on a sandy island covered with white wool. Another time, Starkov, on the way returning from a weather station, saw large human-like footprints on the road. Residents of the taiga farm Cherpulai, Vladimir Norin and Fyodor Sleptsov, walked along the river Dolnaya. Suddenly there was a sharp whistle, so loud that it filled your ears. So they looked back. On the mountain is a figure that looks like a human. The figure was long, more than 2 meters. At the same moment, she rushed to run and quickly disappeared. The story of the foreman of reindeer herders, Alexei Chirikov, is such. My parents were shepherds. Somehow in the summer, they went to the taiga to collect deer, and we, the children, went to the nearest hill for berries. And suddenly we saw a man approaching. He was very tall, dressed in a deer skin, with fur hat on his head. The face was dark and very angry. Here's the story of a resident of the village of Takhta, Alexeyev. There was a caravan of deer. An old man rode ahead on a sled. Suddenly he stopped and started screaming. When the others rode up to him, he pointed to the side of the mountain. Hayak, Hayak! He So he says how some animal ran up the slope. It ran up quickly in big leaps like a masked deer. He decided so because it was covered with wool. But when the masked deer turned around and took the shape of a man, then he screamed. Sometimes it is mentioned that the Chuchuna had primitive stone knives, bows with arrows, reindeer skins, and bonfires worn on the body. Well, elderly Yakuts claim that Chuchuna comes from Chukotka in spring and goes back in September. Yakut Selimanov said that he saw the skeleton of a Chuchuna. His height was 3 meters, his head skull was elongated. The back of the head was in the shape of a boat. Elongated, right? All this gave rise to Professor Draverts and academician Akladnikov to consider them as representatives of a tribe of people unknown to science, who are in their development at the level of the Stone Age people. But where are the women and children? Although very rare, there are stories about encounters of women and children, but only in one area, in the valley of the Adicha River. In the magazine Polyarnaya Zvezda, published in the Yakut language, Atlasov's essay was published that 2 children were left without parents. A Chuchuna came to them. He took care of them and raised them for several years. But then the Chukchi drove up to the area and the Chuchuna left. Now fabulous Kamchatka. And again, you can find a lot of videos about it in my channel. I think you'll like this land. Very paranormal. A reader and local historian from the village of Milkovo, located at the center of the Kamchatka Peninsula, recalled collecting the folklore of Koryak and Kamchadals. I have heard legends and tales more than once in which humanoid creatures appeared, sometimes small, reminiscent of Western European gnomes, then fabulous giants living in the bowels of volcano. True, at that time I was not specifically interested in the enigma of the wild hairy people. I asked some of my informants if they knew anything about the wild people. I did not go far, but close. The living did not tell me any specific cases, but they recommended me to ask if the border guards knew anything. When I contacted them, they told me the following story. In 1980, a detachment of Soviet border guards inspected the control and trace strip running along the ocean coast at Cape Lopatka. This is the name of the southern tip of the Kamchatka Peninsula. Suddenly they saw 2 tall humanoid shapes in front of them, covered with light gray hair, who were slowly wandering around, shallow, exposed of the low tide, and something was collected among the algae remaining on it. The border guards watched this hairy man or hairy people for quite some time, and in appearance, size, and behavior, they could not be saboteurs, and therefore the border guards decided not to report this case, so as not to worry the authorities. One of the members of the outfit told about this case after the end of his service, returning home, but he still asked not to give his last name. Borisov Alexei Vasilyevich tells this, 1967, I then worked in the expedition of volcanologists under the guidance of Doctor of Sciences Volenets. We were 6 people. We worked on the volcano Tetsantsur. One of the members of the expedition, Yermolenko, later became director of the Geological Institute in Moscow. Okay, and here he is already in Moscow asking me if I have seen fumaroles. It's a hole in a volcanic area from which hot smoke and gases escape. I replied that, yeah, of course I saw it, but then I remembered that once near the fumarole I saw some kind of a dark figure, dark shape. At that moment I thought it was a bear and even shot at it with a gun, but missed and it ran away. But it ran just like a man and quickly disappeared into the rocks. Its height was about 3 meters. Now the Magadan region. My father, by the way, when he was in the Soviet army, he was in a number of these places, and he told me how harsh and beautiful they are. Correspondent of the newspaper Tenka Sidorov, February 1991, in the article "The Yeti has not yet been caught," told us the following. In one of the recent sensational issues of regional television, eyewitnesses were shown who observed giant footprints of the Bigfoot in the Tankings Taiga, not far from the village of Madaun. At that time, neither to catch nor they were not able to photograph the wild man. They tried, but they couldn't. But the editors of Tienka received new sensational news. It turned out that the footprints of a furry half-man, half-ape were seen by reindeer herders, hunters, and in the valley of Kalima River, in one of the most remote canyons near Sobin and Mustak. Now the Coral Islands, about which I told you so much, the chain of the islands with this name stretches for almost 1,000 kilometers from the southern tip of Sakhalin Island to the Kamchatka Peninsula. They are of volcanic origin, and the cones of active volcanoes rise above most of them. The northern islands have poor vegetation, mostly of the tundra type, but the southern slopes of the mountains and intermountain valleys are with sparse forests. On the southernmost of them, Kunashir, the forests are real jungles with thickets of bamboo and other subtropical plants. Very cool places, very unusual, ecological, and full of mysteries of the Japanese Empire and who knows what other civilizations thousands of years from before. Here is what the Azerbaijani Rahat Seyfullah from the city of Lenk, Oran, wrote in his letter. I served for a year and a half in 1981-1983 on the island of Kunashir. Someone shot at this huge man, but the authorities did not believe the explanation of the person who shot at the huge man, and for this he was put in a guardhouse as a punishment. And the following happened. It was in the winter of 1983. His shift was from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. Everything was as usual. Fluffy snow was falling down and a strong wind was blowing. Suddenly he saw that next to the tower was a very tall man, almost as tall as the tower. At first the soldier thought that he was dreaming. He opened his sheepskin coat, lowered his collar, felt cold, and realized that he was not sleepy, but really saw a very tall man in front of him. It is huge, all hairy. The soldier is afraid, and his hair stood on end. His head nearly fell off, and he shot at this man. Hit or miss, he doesn't know. When the head of the guard ran to the sound, because of the sound of the shot, and heard his story, he removed him from the post and sent him to the guardhouse. Reported to the authorities in the morning. They brought the soldier in, began to ask him what had happened, but they again did not believe him. They decided that the soldier simply fell asleep at the post and made it all up. He was punished, and they didn't report it anywhere else. But then there was one ensign serving there. He was 55 years old, and he lived on this island for a long time. So this ensign said that a snowman, abominable snowman, really lives on the island. He himself had seen his traces more than once. They were huge. The wild man, according to the ensign, loves fruits and nuts. The ensign also said that the weight of the wild man is about 400 kilograms. This coincides with the huge growth and massive physique. He does not like the noise of the tractors, tank engines, and diesel engines. Then the board guards told that they also saw traces of very large sizes. They said that this man only walks around the island in bad weather, when there is heavy rain or snow and strong winds. Once their diesel engine stalled in bad weather and went out, there was a lightning. They went to have a look, and it turned out that someone has torn some kind of a filter out. Soldiers from the unit went fishing one night, but unexpectedly returned very frightened. They said that when they approached the river, they heard a noise as if someone was bathing. At the first, they thought it was a bear, but as they get closer, they see that it is someone who looks like a huge man. Hearing the approach of humans, the man quickly disappeared into the bushes. But the fisherman also decided to retire. Of course, no one believed the fisherman. In the morning, skeptics went to that place and saw that broken large branches were lying there, crushed by salmon large, and there were also heavy trunks of bamboos all around. Everyone who has ever encountered a relic hominoid notes its ability to influence human consciousness. So the hunter Zakhar Ivanovich Lyubimtsev, in the autumn of 1986 in Krasnoyarsk Taiga, unexpectedly met with a Yeti, a tall furry creature that appeared as if out of the thin air, stood behind a mighty cedar tree and stared intently with reddish little eyes at the man with the gun. As soon as the looks of Lyubimtsev and the mysterious creature met, meaning the eyes, as soon as they saw each other's eyes, Zakhar Ivanovich felt a strong dizziness, and his arms and legs felt like cotton wool. At some point, the hunter felt that he was beginning to fall asleep. He blinked, and then he saw that the furry creature standing behind the cedar had disappeared. Another curious incident occurred in 1999 on a deserted section of the Novosibirsk Kemerovo highway. The driver driving the passenger bus suddenly saw that a very tall and large man appeared on the road about 20 meters from the vehicle. At first it seemed to the driver that the stranger was wearing a brown fur sheepskin coat and a winter hat of the same color. He started emergency braking, but the speed of the bus was quite high, and soon the driver realized that he could not avoid hitting a person. And at the very moment when the intercity bus was supposed to crush the gawking traveler, he suddenly disappeared. 36 bus passengers witnessed this unusual incident, many of whom began to claim that the pedestrian who found himself on the highway was not a person at all, but some mysterious being. And finally, in April of 2019, a photo of incomprehensible creature was sent to the press service of Selikdar. The user writes the following: "An abominable snowman appeared in the forest of the Aldan district. The picture was taken in the vicinity of the city, not far from the central base of the company Selikdar," the correspondent reported. That was reported in the Birobidzhan city in the company's press service. It is not clear from the picture what kind of creature it is. One can definitely say that this creature is upright as it walks along the path. He has dark fur, apparently very thick. In conditions of Yakut frosts, this is one of the many ways to keep warm. One of the main ways to keep warm. As far as we know, no similar cases have been recorded in the Aldan before. It is probably possible to conduct a more detailed study on the spot and make plaster prints of footprints, perhaps examine the place of where he was lying. It is too early to talk about the new Yakut phenomenon, the Aldan snowman. The press service of the company interviewed some of the old-timers of the Selikdar, but none of them recalled any such facts. But the archives helped. It turns out that back in 1929, the newspaper Autonomous Yakutia published an article called Chuchuna. It told that in the Tsar's Russia, in the northern region of Yakutia, there was a belief about the existence in the far north of an unknown people called Chuchuna. Every year they were seen in the Butantai Naslek of Verkhoyansky Ulus. That's their geographical locations they use their names, in the direction of Zhigansk. According to eyewitnesses, the Chuchuna were distinguished by their tall stature and very strong physique, with very long hair. They dressed in animal skins, could shoot arrows, and ran very fast. Whether the Aldan phenomenon is the mysterious Chuchuna that we talked about, it's still unknown, and so far there are more questions than answers, and we will look for answers. My audience, if you like my research, please support me to the links you will find in the description to this video, and I'll attach a playlist about the abominable snowman, Yeti, and whatever name he or she go by. And of course I'll continue my research, and I hope you find it interesting. Please like my channel, my videos, please subscribe to my channel, and please tell others. There is so much mysterious and interesting in this world, and I hope to bring you as many stories as I can. Thank you.